Good afternoon, dear members, our esteemed speakers, my senior colleague and co-moderator, Mr. S. Manohar. A very hearty welcome to all of you in today's interactive discussion on mapping the emerging trends reshaping industries post-COVID-19 in India by VDMA India in association with Frost & Sullivan as our knowledge partner. We all hope that you and your families and employees are all safe and doing well. Myself, Sandeep Roy, based out of Calcutta office of VDMA, and would be taking you through the initial part of today's webinar. Friends, no economy, industry, or the business has been spared from the effect of the novel coronavirus. It is fair to say that every industry is experiencing its unique set of challenges that are threatening their workflow and the business models. Apart from the global pandemic, major economics have already experienced a slowdown due to the major additional factors causing a ripple effect to the world GDP in decline. Risk mitigation actions are key to survival and the better position ourselves at this point of recovery. COVID-19 has an impact on the multiple facets of our lives, including the way we work, conduct business, or leisure. While some of these impacts have been shifting into major trends, the underlying technology transformation has been significantly accelerated. Many of our habits have changed. We are experiencing a new world altogether. This unexpected and adverse shift in habits and mindset has impacted the economics heavily, but in some cases, the results are exponentially positive. So the adaptability and the creative decision makings will play a key role in sustainability of the enterprises. In this context, VDMA India, in association with Frost & Sullivan, is hosting today's web seminar. I would like to introduce and welcome two of our experts from Frost & Sullivan joining us today's program, along with Mr. Kiran Kumar V, Research Manager, Tech Vision, Frost & Sullivan. Hearty welcome, Kiran. And Mr. Gautam Shivabalan, Senior Director, Manufacturing and Process Consulting Practices, Frost & Sullivan. Hearty welcome you to also, Gautam. Friends, moving forward, a very brief intro about the VDMA. VDMA is the largest industrial association in Europe with a legacy of more than 127 years. VDMA has 3,300 of members with a whopping 1.03 billions of employees under its memberships, and it has a total production of the companies of whopping 232 billion euro, out of which 78% are exported worldwide. For ease of operation, VDMA is divided into 39 engineering verticals. Understanding the potential of the BRICS nation, VDMA decided to establish its foreign offices way back in 90s, and India is the first offices of the VDMA which established in the foreign arms, followed by China, Brazil, and Russia. And VDMA also has two offices for representation at Belgium for the European Union, and also the small offices in Japan. Friends, now I would like to invite Kiran Kumar. Before that, I would like to take a first poll of today's. Can I have the poll question, please?
Yeah, I think all of you can see the first poll online. The first poll question is, what should be the key priority of the Indian government to revive the economy at this stage? So I request you all.
Poll question is not here now.
Yeah. So the first question on the poll is, yes. Please, what should be the key priority of the Indian government to revive the economy at this stage? So the various options for you for selection is scaling up public spending to infuse life into the economy, tackling unemployment, devolving power and funds to state and local bodies. I request you to vote, please.
Yes, just wait for some time and then we get the results to understand how the mail. I think we should have now, Manohar, if you can have it, the results, please.
1 second. I think there has been a mistake. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can do the voting. There was a mistake earlier. Yeah.
Okay. May I request all our attendees to kindly just repoll it.
Okay, I think there was some technical glitch. We could not do it across.
Okay. So
carry
no
on.
issue.
Go ahead. Carry on.
Yeah. So friends, I would like to now invite our first speaker, Mr. Kiran Kumar. Kiran is a research manager of the digital transformation practices in Tech Vision at Frost & Sullivan and based in Chennai. He has worked with a subject matter expert and with the ability to retain the grow revenues within ICT industry across the consumer device, including PC, mobile phones, wearables, and computing peripherals, as well as emerging IC technologies, including machine learning, AI, blockchain, data analytics, security, and extended reality. Prior to Frost & Sullivan, Kiran was associated with International Data Corporation, better known as IDC, heading their device research for India and the South Asian markets for almost 7 years. He has been associated with analytics setup Course 5 Intelligence, where he was a part of the core group supporting the pre-launch of Windows 7 for the Microsoft Research Lab at Redmond. Friend, over to you, Kiran.
Thank you, Mr. Sandeep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to firstly thank all of you for tuning into today's presentation. Today's topic of discussion would be mapping the emerging trends reshaping the industries post-COVID-19 in India. As we all know, no industry or economy has been spared from the effects of the novel coronavirus. Of course, some of the industries have been more affected than others, but it is only fair to say that every industry is experiencing its unique set of challenges that are threatening their workflow and business models. We believe that this crisis has made it clear in the business world, more so than ever, that investing in emerging technologies can potentially do a world of good. And I hope we all can agree that the growing dependency, be it on e-commerce, business conferencing tools, digital learning, VR-based training, or various other business applications supporting remote workers, cannot be dismissed as a blip and is likely to remain the new norm amongst businesses worldwide. So moving on to the next slide. Before I start my discussion on the key trends we believe are reshaping the industries today, and more importantly, the top 50 emerging technologies and associated growth opportunities that we have identified, I would like to kind of quickly give a perspective about Frost & Sullivan in terms of who we are. So we are a growth pipeline company. We are primarily in the business of research and advisory services for over 60 years now. And we've been aiding enterprises and the leadership teams in identifying opportunities that addresses some of the core challenges related to growth. Moving on to the next slide. So what is the strategic imperative? Today, it's increasingly becoming difficult for CEOs to maintain growth. And in a survey that we conducted with the global CEOs, we found that the average tenure of CEOs have reduced to 2.5 years from 10 something around 30 years back. Also, due to lack of innovations, almost 80% of companies that started prior 1980 have all gone. They don't exist. So why is growth difficult to achieve? We believe there are certain factors associated with it. Moving on to the next slide. Moving on to the next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so here we've highlighted 8 factors, which are the ones that are creating the pressure in businesses today. And in my discussion, I'll be specifically covering disruptive technologies and potential convergence opportunities that you see specifically addressing these 8 perspectives, different perspectives. So moving on to the next slide. Let me quickly share some very interesting work that our team at Frost & Sullivan. So I particularly represent a practice area called as TechVision, and I just want to kind of quickly share some of the interesting work that we are doing in the field of emerging technologies, innovations, and technology convergence. But before I jump into the presentation, I would just like to kind of define the context of my presentation. So TechVision is the technology, IP, innovation, and convergence focused group of Frost & Sullivan. Our analysts all around the world are constantly engaged with technology clients, focusing on innovations and emerging technologies and covering an entire gamut of research and development activities that are spread across government-sponsored research, R&Ds of companies, research institutes, research incubation centers, non-government labs, not-for-profit organizations, and certainly the corporate sector, starting from small entities to large and very large enterprises. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, so we cover technologies across 9 different clusters that you see here, such as information and communication technologies, medical devices, microelectronics, sensors and instrumentation, advanced manufacturing and automation, chemicals and advanced materials, energy and utilities, environment and sustainability, and health and wellness. We believe that more than 90% of the world's technologies and innovations can be directly mapped in these 9 cluster technology formats. So this is a fairly comprehensive coverage, and all developments, technology developments, nicely ties into several vertical industries that you are now viewing on the right side of your screen. Moving on to the next slide. So no briefing can happen today without mentioning about the impact of COVID. So we believe we are living in a VUCA world, which particularly means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. VUCA has led to where the world is today, and COVID has probably brought the world to its knees economically. As the world starts to reopen, organizations, people, and even government and federal agencies need to plan and do scenario analysis for all events, including what we call as black swan moments. For instance, total internet outage for a few days globally, that would be considered as a black swan. So black swan events are not common, they're obviously rare, but cannot be ruled out in the future. And COVID has clearly exposed limited planning and execution to control such disruptions. That said, third quarter of 2020, we believe would see partial to complete lifting of lockdowns in most parts of the world, leading to the resumption of activities to some extent. However, global GDP growth is expected to remain in the negative territory, both in the third quarter and the fourth quarter of this calendar year 2020, given the extension of severe disruptions in certain sectors such as travel, hospitality, entertainment, and education. Moving into 2021, the first quarter of 2021, we expect positive rebound to happen across the globe, and return to full recovery should happen by the third quarter of 2021. World GDP growth will take on a stretched V-curve pattern basis our analysis. However, we are also evaluating other possibilities wherein the V-curve could move into potentially a W-curve recovery trajectory, which would involve a second wave of COVID-19 cases in 2021, under the assumption of non-availability of vaccines in major countries, inadequate social distancing practices, and complete lifting of lockdowns. We hope this doesn't happen though. Moving on to the next slide. GDP growth across all regions don't look good. So we have highlighted the impact across key regions and countries in this particular slide. The United States registered a 0.3% GDP growth in the first quarter of this year compared to same period in 2019. The consumption-driven economy witnessed a negative 20% drop in its second quarter of 2020 compared to the same period previous year. Eurozone is also expecting severe contraction, with the second quarter GDP growth expected to be around negative 14.4%. Asia Pacific region appears to now have contained the virus to a large extent. Full recovery is expected by fourth quarter of 2020. Similarly, in South Asia, we're forecasting a zero growth, and oil exporting Gulf economies are battling both lockdowns as well as a collapse in oil prices. With this situation in context, we believe technology remains a key enabler for growth and innovation. Technology has enabled quicker development of solutions in the past, whether it's leveraging data analytics to identify clusters where the virus spreads, or to develop a vaccine to treat the same with the data set available. That's where tools like AI, big data, bioinformatics assessments all come to play to address the situation quickly and take action as it necessitates. And that is why it's very critical that we stay on top of the technology space, ahead of the curve, to address all of these concerns. We believe an innovation drives the economy and the solutions thereafter. Moving on to the next slide. So let's get a little deeper to see examples coming from emerging technology-based innovations. We firmly believe that we are entering the era of X-Tech, that is from finding killer applications now to finding disruptive innovations. What you see here are leading examples of tech innovations that are likely to be applied in the future. In the interest of time today, I'll highlight a couple of examples. I'll just draw your attention to a few examples here. Neons were introduced by Samsung-backed Star Labs, and this is based on artificial human technology. These were originally demoed at CES, held in January this year. So the existing challenges, industry challenges, are that the incumbent bots and artificial assistants that exist today are only trained to fetch information and answer questions. They cannot automatically create data or information that is different from the training data sets. Neons are virtually real. It is a digitally generated humanoid avatar that can visually look, converse, and sympathize like us, like human beings. So neons in the future are contemplated to be used to play a number of roles, starting from being a healthcare provider or as TV anchors, gym supervisors, perhaps movie actors, or they could simply be used as virtual companions and friends. We believe it's a very innovative concept that is likely to offer disruptive opportunity in the future for businesses. The second example that I would like to highlight here is that of 5D printing. 5D printing is a new branch of additive manufacturing. In this technology, the print head and the printable object will have 5 degrees of freedom. Instead of the flat layer, it produces curved layers. Results of 5D printed objects are noted to be 3 to 5 times stronger than a 3D printed object today. In terms of its key applications and use cases, we believe healthcare is of critical importance. 5D printing can be used for printing of complex surgical implants with curved surfaces. The technology can also be used in surgical teaching to provide medical students with a platform that provides prototype parts of organs for improved learning. In India, we already have a startup by the name Ethereal Missions. Researchers at Ethereal Missions have developed a hybrid system that comprises of a 5-axis CNC router and a 5-axis 3D printing print head. The last example that I would like to draw your attention to would be of wearable organs. Today, we are quite familiar with wearable monitoring devices such as Fitbit or smartwatches. A wearable organ is a step into the future where technology advancements reduces the footprint of bulky medical device into wearable electromechanical device, both in terms of size and weight, that can resume the lost function of a failed organ. So addressing the challenge of bulky dialysis machines, which limits mobility and disrupts lifestyle, these ultra-portable dialysis machines can perform dialysis when patients are on the go. In fact, just last year, US-based FDA, Food and Drug Administration, granted breakthrough designation, device designation, to a wearable dialysis system. This patient-centric medical technology is certainly going to be life-changing for patients in the coming years. Moving on to the next slide. This slide highlights our flagship service around top 50 technologies and primarily the methodology that we follow to identify the top 50 technologies that are likely to disrupt industry sectors globally. So what we do is we start by scanning and creating a long list of technologies, say hundreds of technologies that are driving incremental, disruptive, and radical opportunities to businesses across the globe. We then apply a mathematical model to evaluate each of these technologies on subconstructs that are highlighted here using a weighted criteria approach. And these subconstructs or parameters, basis which we evaluate, like we've highlighted here, includes IP activity, patent filings over the last 2 years, investment analysis over the last 2 years, market potential over the next 5 years, impact across industry megatrends, adoption potential across regions, impact across industry sectors, tech disruptiveness, and tech cluster evolution. We then score and rank these technologies based on the statistical model to finally shortlist the top 50 emerging technologies, which we have highlighted in the succeeding slide. Moving on to the next slide. So this is the top 50 technologies that we've identified this year, basis the methodology that I just highlighted in the earlier slide. So I wish I had the time to take you through with each of these technologies, but for this brief discussion, I will just pick a few technologies as examples for this for this session. Some technologies that you're looking here are obvious, for instance, advanced lithium-ion batteries, sustainable packaging, and a few could be really surprising, such as blue hydrogen, living maps, synthetic foods, etc. So two things come out of it. One is if you are invested in any of these technologies today, then the recommendation is that you stay invested in them. Two is the potential probability of convergence related to these technologies. That is when each of these technologies begin to converge with other technologies. That could result in an unexpected idea or a solution which could potentially become a game changer in the future. So in the interest of time, moving on to the next slide. So like I said earlier, I'll highlight a few technologies in a little detail. The first one we've picked here is climate controlled agriculture. CCA is basically the process for stimulating photosynthetically active parameters, including lighting, ventilation, nutrient injection, and carbon dioxide exposure of crops. The use of CCA systems for intensive agriculture results in increased productivity, reduces fertilizer utilization, and also helps farmers to plan crop production based on the demand, as the CCA system does not depend on the seasonality issues associated with conventional agriculture. CCA systems can even be implemented in space. For instance, NASA is already working on the installation of a CCA system in International Space Station. We believe that this is a very important technology to be looked into because the coronavirus pandemic, in fact, has impacted the labor industry significantly, resulting in increased wages. This is very crucial for sectors like agriculture, as any disruption to the food supply chain can lead to a nationwide food crisis. CCA can potentially overcome these challenges as it mitigates the need for fertigation, soil tilling, and mission handling, resulting in drastic reduction in labor requirement. Moving on to the next slide. Collaborative robots. These are specially designed to assist and work alongside professional working employees to optimize the process flow and drastically increase manufacturing efficiency by achieving full-scale automation. We have certain participants even in India. For instance, Bajaj Auto and Mahindra are avid cobot users in the automotive sector. Similarly, in the FMCG sector, multinational corporations such as L'Oreal have completely eradicated ergonomic risks by using cobots for automated palletizing. Very recently, early this month, in fact, Mitsubishi Electric launched a series of collaborative robots called Melfa Assista in India. We noticed that a lot of Indian SMEs and even micro SMEs across industries have been able to and are looking to adopt cobots for various applications, including packaging, spray painting, and quality inspection. Moving on to the next slide. DNNs are basically deep neural networks. They constitute the backbone of deep learning, which are a class of AI and machine learning systems that are modeled closely after the human brain. DNNs are being considered increasingly because the volume of data and complexity associated across industry sectors are increasing every day. And traditional ML algorithms, the erstwhile machine learning algorithms, are struggling to maintain their model accuracy when faced with large unstructured data sets. A couple of key sectors or areas where we see a major play of DNNs today include autonomous vehicles. Tesla has initiated Project Dojo, for instance. And similarly, we have voice assistants. Amazon Alexa is a great example of using DNNs to build and develop contextually intelligent agents. And as well in defense applications, for instance, the Department of Defense in USA are using DNN systems to basically launch missiles and track them with accuracy. In India, recent draft paper from NITI Aayog has mentioned that AI deep learning systems are expected to boost India's annual growth rate by 1.3% over the next 10 to 15 years. The government of India is in fact funding specific research projects in AI and deep learning systems, and is also planning to introduce ethics of AI into the university curriculum. Moving on to the next slide. Carbon materials such as CNTs, graphene, nanowires, and carbon fibers are used as nanofiller or reinforcement in various materials to induce smart functionalities in products, especially in the energy storage, electronics, and automotive industry. The pandemic has impacted the chemical and material industry in various ways. It has decreased the need for certain value-added chemicals, while the demand for basic and polymers remains steady. Carbon materials are a domain which is witnessing steady interest as it has a significant role, especially in the structural applications. Converting carbon dioxide into sustainable carbon materials and products to extend their use in value chains is already being investigated by majors such as Reliance, Tata Steel, and Tata Chemicals, which are primarily investigating ways to convert carbon dioxide to materials for use and monetization. Moving on to the next slide. Here we have presented an example of technology convergence scenarios that I earlier alluded to. So we have presented the scenario of batteries to batteries. So with the supply of raw material being the biggest threat for lithium battery industry, Frost & Sullivan envisions a convergence scenario wherein the battery ecosystem can leverage advanced telecommunications and sensor technologies to overcome supply chain and logistic challenges of battery recycling. End-of-life batteries can be safely and reliably collected using technologies such as living maps, neuromorphic processing, and 5G for efficient recycling to recover valuable battery materials such as lithium, cobalt, and others. The recovered materials can be used to manufacture advanced lithium-ion batteries with higher energy densities and safer operating profile. Thus, a scenario of batteries to batteries can be established, paving way for reliable battery material supply, improved economics of battery recycling, and reduced environmental impact of end-of-life batteries. Sorry. Moving on to the next slide. Autonomous factory is another convergence scenario that we've proposed. It's basically a state-of-the-art automated manufacturing setup, which leverages holographic 3D printing technology for printing objects at high speed and high precision. The manufacturing setup can potentially leverage the benefits of technologies such as sensor fusion, cobots, deep neural networks or AI systems, neuromorphic processing, and AI-based sensors, along with, most importantly, holographic 3D printer. So there are several such examples. We've just limited to 2 today. Moving on to the next slide. So we, at Frost & Sullivan, over the years, we've been able to identify and identify opportunities, growth opportunities for businesses much ahead of its time. And this has been the case over the years. And in this particular slide, we've highlighted certain examples wherein our teams had highlighted the market potential over time, and our predictions came true over the years. So we've highlighted technologies such as 3D printing, facial recognition, driverless cars, and MEMS platforms. In each of these tech instances, our predictions have come true over the years. For instance, even about 7-8 years back, we did make a mention that quantum dot-based image sensors would play a very integral role in facial recognition technology. And as early as a couple of years back, Apple was one of the first players, companies so to invest, in image sensor startup called as Envisage Technologies, which had filed hundreds of patents on the quantum dot-based image sensing technology. So there are several such examples. We'll be happy to discuss specifics, if required offline. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, this is basically the last slide of my presentation. So now, more than ever, pragmatism holds the key to staying afloat, especially in times like these. At a time when economies and businesses are functioning at their bare minimum, this crisis provides an unprecedented opportunity for business leaders to pause, think, and realign their long-term business strategies and put their crisis response strategies to the test. With an agile working model that allows businesses to remain productive, digitization and adoption of emerging technologies, some of which we highlighted in the previous slides, will continue to be a critical priority, and we believe they will serve as a cost-effective route for business differentiation across industry verticals in the foreseeable future. With that, I'll pass over the presentation to my colleague, Mr. Gautam.
Thank you, Kiran, for an insightful presentations. Before inviting Gautam for the presentations, I would like to remind all our attendees that you can post all of your questions during the webinar under the question sections, and they would be answered during the Q&A session. And now I would like to take the second poll question. Can I have the second poll, Manohar? Yeah, the question is, what would be the final outcome of the campaign that government has recently launched for the Vocal for Local? These are the 3 options. It will be true in its sense, or lack clarity for the way forward, and it will remain as a slogan. So I would request all of you to kindly participate and share your views on that. So just wait for a few moments. Let's wait for you, and then we'll take the answer. Yeah, can I have the poll result possible? Yeah, it's a very close call. True in its sense, 43% we voted in favor, and lacks clarity, which is 40%. That means there is a balance between these two actually. Thank you very much, our audience. Now moving to, I'd like to invite Mr. Gautam Shivabalan, the Senior Director, Manufacturing and Process Consulting Practices, Frost & Sullivan, for his presentation on handling manufacturing challenges, a COVID-19 perspective. Gautam heads the manufacturing and the process consulting practices for the South Asia and Middle East region of Frost & Sullivan. In his role, he is presently responsible for the revenue and profitability of the manufacturing and process consulting business units. He has more than 2 decades of experience across business excellence, sustainability, manufacturing, IT, RFID, supply chain management, and implementation of lean principles. Gautam has authored several articles for global publications on the implementation of the lean concept, cellular manufacturing and IT enablement, supply chain efficiencies. He has hosted numerous workshops for middle and senior management and also been a speaker for various events organized by the FICCI, CII, and the National Academy of Defense. Over to you, Gautam, for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Sandeep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I see my presentation on? Sweet. A very good afternoon to all of you gathered here. With this situation, I'd always love to have a face-to-face or an interaction where we can see each other and interact more informally. But I think the present situation of COVID has made all of us learn new skills, talk to a screen, and hopefully get something back out of the screen and then respond accordingly. What I'm trying to touch about here in my brief 20-minute talk is give you a perspective of the manufacturing challenges because of COVID. There are a couple of slides I'll probably breeze through. There are some content that I might probably touch upon only some of the key elements. We did hear Kiran a few minutes back talk about the various technologies that almost everybody seems to be saying, technology is the boon for us. Technology is the ray of light, and is going to be the knight in shining armor to probably save us all from situations like what we face today. And I'd like to share some insights in terms of how manufacturing companies are taking this. We've been interacting with about 45-50 different manufacturing companies across sectors in the last 4 or 5 months. And what you see today is probably a compilation of our experience and their experiences put together. Next one, please. So everybody's speaking about the impact of the COVID-19. You've seen different colors of curve, different kinds of curve. The way I'd look at it from the manufacturing perspective is only in terms of the depth of disruption or the kind of impact it has on the industry, the duration of that impact in terms of the length of the disruption, and in terms of the shape of recovery, talking about how is it that we are going to rebound or come back to normalcy, or how whether you're going to have a peak and then come back down, or the suppressed demand is going to come back and then stabilize over a period of time. Next slide, please. Yeah, what we did was we did some research, and we've kind of put across a bunch of industries, starting from transformational health, chemicals, materials and food, personal care, all the way through to construction, real estate, mobility, aerospace, and tourism and leisure at your right hand side. So what we've said is the ones on the left have had a net positive impact to the industry, and the ones on the right are experiencing a net negative impact. If you look at the next slide, what we've tried to do is we've tried to identify what these impacts are. Next slide, please. If you look at positively impacted industries, their ability to react to a sudden surge in demand has been a big challenge for them. Their experience in shortage of workforce, the ability of the vendors to ramp up, ensuring that the protocols for ensuring a safe work environment, controls, and the sudden spurt of technologies and what to adopt and how to adopt them has been one of the key challenges that they've faced. Whereas if you look at the negatively impacted industries, the challenge has been to react to suppressed demand. Next, please. Companies have faced issues like cash crunch, complete erosion or disruption in their supplier base, a lot of skill that has been lost because of manpower moving off. Customer retention has been a major cause of concern, and obvious resource constraints. The next one. What all of these, next slide, please. What all of these also makes us look is, let us look back in history and see if there is something that we can actually learn from. Although we, in the last 2 decades, there has never been an impact so deep and so profound that the whole world has been shaken up. But there have been sufficient indications that we need to look back and look at our supply chain, look at our manufacturing capabilities, and learn something from the past. So if you look at, we've had the dips that you see in the blues and the major dips that you see because of the global financial crisis that happened about a decade ago, and you had the eurozone. You had minor dips, and each of them tested the economies of various countries. And where we stand in today, I think, is one of the most unprecedented ones in our lifetime. Next slide, please. If you look back and try to understand how the supply chain systems have been evolving, what has always been a characteristic that each stage or each era of evolution of the supply chain has been characterized by a great degree of integration. Next, the first one has been the Ford era, the way I would fondly call it, where everybody believed that if your supply chain is well stocked, that is the key to success. You're able to deliver faster, you're able to sell faster, and you're able to rake in on the money. Then came in the second era, which was the lean era, where companies like Toyota propagated a completely different philosophy, where inventories were treated as wastes, supplies were treated as partners, and the whole world was moving towards a single source, more reliable single source, and things like that. And inventories in the entire supply chain were going leaner and leaner. And the third era that we see as of today is the agile era, where everybody is looking for a high degree of flexibility. Words like mass customization are something that everybody is trying to vie for. The only question is, after all these eras, is there something that we probably missed in terms of a key aspect? And I think the word resilience strikes a very strong chord in terms of, we've tested it for success with respect to stocking, in terms of inventories, in terms of flexibility, but has the supply chain ever been tested for resilience before? Next slide, please. What we believe is COVID has had its bad effects, but it is also a time where a lot of issues have been exposed because of the COVID. Some of the key failure modes that I think we could look at as those that were exposed in our value chain are, the fact that our tier 1 and tier 2 supply base is structurally very weak. They are not able to take on such fluctuations. And in all the strategy and the risk mitigation that most companies carry around, looking at the vendors, the tier 1 and tier 2 is generally an ignored aspect. And almost all companies have their strategy for sourcing being strongly driven by cost competitiveness, because it's an obvious choice. But have the question that I think everybody is reflecting upon is, have we been talking about lean or agility at the actual cost of being sustainable and resilient through such fluctuations? And like Kiran touched about, there are a whole host of technologies, but whether the adoption of these technologies towards rapid improvements is actually taking place, whether it's in the areas of the operational matrices of productivity, quality delivery, or in terms of upskilling and training, and in terms of bringing in enterprise systems to enable end-to-end visibility and more data-based decision making. The next one, please. Next slide, please. What are the key questions that we're trying to look at is, have we been able to counter this or try to reduce the impact? And what I've done is, in the subsequent slides, I've broken it down into two very simple banners. One would be the people aspect of it, and the other is all the processes aspect, where we combine all the manufacturing related challenges, the physical, the infrastructural part of it on one side. If I look at the people part of it, I've broken it down into four specific aspects. Can we go to the next slide, please? If you look at communication, now this has been an extremely critical point. Most often than not, it's the most talked about, and just about everybody seems to say apt communication, make sure it is authentic, periodic, and transparent, is something that almost everybody seems to be propagating. But some of the unique practices that are what we have seen that companies have adopted over the years is that many of them have used customized apps for ensuring a faster interaction across their entire employee base. Some companies have even extended this to include the details of the family members as well, and ensure that they are getting a first-hand and a real-time information with respect to what is the status of the health, and in terms of any cases that are being reported, directly coming to a central server for faster action and correction as such. WhatsApp has been a mode that has been also uniquely leveraged by many people. We've got chief medical officers having access to family through WhatsApp calls. There are videos that are made in the local languages that are circulated, and essentially the purpose has been to bring everybody down to saying that regularly there is a video that comes out from the CMO every Monday afternoon or every Monday evening, and that talks about the latest. It busts the myths that are there. It busts a lot of new theories, a lot of new remedies that people seem to be spending across. All of these getting evaluated and sent back to the CMO, who clearly tells them this is the right, these are the wrongs, these are what you need to believe in, and that kind of bolsters a more effective and a positive mode of communication amongst the workforce. And a lot of companies or forward-looking companies have proactively started engaging with nearby communities, the society that surrounds their workforce, and also the logistic partners and the contact workforce as such. If you look at the next slide, it talks about the next slide, please. Talks about the health aspect, which is something that everybody is very mindful of. There has been a lot of efforts to try and digitize all the past records and the health data, and they've tried to bucket people into red, orange, and green zones, and trying to preemptively identify existing risks amongst employees. The obvious work with respect to screening, testing, and contact tracing is something that I think almost all companies nowadays are following. But some of the unique things that we saw in some companies is rather than having your regular tea or coffee breaks, companies have started giving Ayush recommended immunity boosters. And this not only helps them boost their immunity, it also helps them feel that the organization is taking care of.
Yeah, Gautam, I think you are unmute. Gautam, you are not audible.
Gautam, we can't hear you.
Coming back together and supporting the management in terms of any decisions with respect to ramp up, with respect to being able to come back or limp back to a certain sense of normalcy. Some of the companies have also used technologies like geofencing, GPS tracking cards for individuals. They've had access control restrictions, and even some cases zonal timeout, saying that if you're getting into that zone, I don't think you should be there for beyond the time. And there are alarms that have been generated, and these are really interesting to see, wherein companies have leveraged existing technologies, put them together to a use case, and being able to ensure that the health of the people are at their foremost. The next slide, please. If you look at all of these to try and boost the morale of the people that are there in the companies. One of the highlights of a company that I was interacting with have had automated bots for mood checks. Now, it is quite imperative. We've all now gotten used to coming back, working from home, too much of screen time. There's a lot of work that needs to get done. Working from home has its own sense of challenges and stress levels as well. In fact, a recent survey that was taken across multiple companies, close to about 700 odd participants, it was noted that over 60% of them felt that working from home was more stressful than actually working in the offices. And this company leveraged the use of technology, and there were automated bots. So you would have a question that would pop up in your screen saying, "Hey, Gautam, how are you? How are you doing today?" And then there would be, just a few clicks. Every once in a while, this would automatically learn in terms of your response time to the question, what kind of mood you are in, and it would form a pattern that would get analyzed by an algorithm, and then the central HR team would get an indication saying that, I think this is a person who's getting into a certain sense of depression, or is a certain unhappy person, or these are times that are not really good for him, and they would have specific counseling sessions specific to these kind of people who are supporting on a work from home, and they would have engaging sessions with them to try and get them back on track or get them to be happy. So one of the new KPIs that got added to the HR was to ensure that the mood of the employees were always happy. So something very interesting and unique that we saw in some companies. Obviously, most of them have defined clear protocols talking about break times, a top cap for the time limit for meetings, etc. What they've done is some of these companies have leveraged interactive games and family bonding by having a celebration of events, birthdays, work anniversaries. There are some new platforms that have come in the fore where an actual live event can be simulated. So you actually have all the fanfare and the fireworks. Many videos of the employees coming in on the screen comes in, and then they send these clippings to them so that they can then share it in their social media. And that's something that many companies have leveraged to kind of boost morale of people. And obviously, many have resorted to online rewards and recognition. You get coupons, you get watch your coach for your online shopping, and kind of kept the R&R schemes going, and thereby keeping the employees more engaged and their morale high and committed to fighting the situation together. The last part under the people is to do with the training part. The next slide, please. Where many companies have actually partnered with professional online training platforms. There are many online universities that you can speak about, but some of the companies have actually gotten specific course credits from either LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or a bunch of these universities. And these credits are also being specified and being monitored. So there are certain, in my performance measurement, they've tried to do for the entire quarter, saying that you need to get 10 credits from a choice of so many courses. You can pick what you want among these 10 curated courses. The company funds it, but then you take the online course, you give the exam, and then you submit that scores back to the organization. And therefore, new skill sets have been identified. People's soft skills have actually developed a lot, and many of the teams have actually used their sales and marketing teams as coaches for a lot of the staff. And this actually has also improved a lot of brought the organization closer rather than working in many silos. Some of the companies feel that this has got the individuals within the companies coming closer. The sales marketing team talk about the situation, the issues, and in case the situation improves, what is it that they need to be ready for. And these kind of training sessions are something that I believe are extremely essential for companies to adopt to be able to ramp up in case the situation improves. The second pillar was with respect to the processes. Can we go to the next slide, please? If you look at the manufacturing infrastructure as such, a lot of companies have internally looked at their layout and the material handling systems, and they've in order to ensure social distancing norms, increased use of or more innovative use of vertical space. So you've got some sub-assemblies that have got shifted to a mezzanine floor coming down there. Some of the storage, what was there, they've moved it out. Use of a lot of storage space, material storage space to factor in for assemblies, and that storage has gotten broken down into multiple areas within the entire shop floor areas. A lot of inline activities, contrary to the popular thought of having everything in one single piece floor, in one single assembly line, with respect to space constraint, some of them have been broken down, taken out of the single assembly line into sub-assemblies and offline activities, and they're being fed into so that social distancing norms are still maintained. Obviously, a lot of companies have adopted the shift management by increasing the number of shifts, reducing the number of people in each shift so that you're able to group them into pockets. Crew management is something that many companies have adopted in a different approach, where shift supervisors are also given a specific training and a badge where they're also called as the health wardens. And they not only take care of the daily allocations at a station wise, they not only look at the typical indicators of productivity, the quality matrices, but they also take care of the health matrices. They look out for symptoms, they help, they counsel, and they also ensure that these norms and these SOPs are being followed. One of the unique things that I did see in one of the walkthrough videos of a company was there were add-on lights. You know, you've seen these machines, the red, green, and the orange amber lights that glow. So if there's something wrong, you have the red light that flashes. If it's waiting for something, the orange light flashes, and the green means it's working as per the required norm. I've seen these add-on lights outside the restrooms of these companies where they say that if you should have at any point in time only 3 people in, and so you have the red light restricting anybody to even get in there. So a quite unique adoption of existing technologies to ensure that as an overall protocol within the physical boundaries and the infrastructure related to manufacturing. And typically the crowd that gets into manufacturing are generally a lot more difficult to handle, a lot more difficult to adapt to sudden or drastic change. And these small, I would say, practices and activities have gone a long way. One of the unique thing is one company that we did interact with actually supplied furniture for the employees who are working from home. These were ergonomically designed furniture for them to use when they are at home. It could be a wall mounted, or it could be a simple table and chair set, specifically designed. And they actually went there, they consulted with them and said this is probably the best area in your home to keep it, and kind of help them in. And although it was a bit of an investment by the company, but what they found was the uptime of employees was consistent in these cases. So I think this was something that kind of helped them when they were in a lot of support related calls. Can we go to the next slide, please? On the integration, obvious work with respect to integration of the data silos and having one enterprise application is something that we've seen in many places. One of the things that I've been observing, although I don't have a concrete data on it, is where they're trying to decentralize the management. They're also trying to get all the information into a centralized area where we will be able to take much more faster or data-based judgment calls. Some of the unique things are we've had some people use drones for surveillance and security. Obviously, these are large companies where they've got a huge area that needs to be looked at. So they've also used drones to look at either eliminating or reducing the maintenance activities in some of these cases as well. So to summarize between the people and the process part of it, what we've seen is, although we do believe technology is an extremely critical arm, or it's a very powerful enabler to handle or tackle a situation like this, a lot of innovation, a lot of process changes, modification, and some of the core principles being questioned back has probably enabled some of the companies that have actually bounced back or have been able to reduce the impact of COVID into their operations. And what I did share with you just a few of the more prominent ones that we have seen over the last 4 months or so. Can we go to the next slide, please? What we've done is we've just summarized in this last slide of mine in terms of what are the key issues that the CEO generally has in his mind as a person who's running the organization, people who are the typical queries or the issues with respect to the liquidity crisis. I think this is something that everybody is going through, ensuring morale and productivity are still maintained high, uncertainty and diminished sales pipelines, costs still trying to go out of the control, maturity of digital systems, and how do you continue to engage with customers, and should there be a rebound right around the corner, how do we prepare ourselves and be geared up for it. So the grid that you see in front of you is just a grid, or a 3x3 grid, where we've proposed that there could be 3 core teams that an organization could have. One is the crisis management team, another is the growth team, and the third one is the digital transformation team. And we've broken the timeline into 3 phases, which is the respond phase, the reset phase, and the rebound phase. The response phase is that point in time where the impact is seen, and you're at the point where you're trying to figure out what is to be done. A lot of the points that we spoke about, establishing the SOPs, the protocols, kicking start into building the infrastructure, getting the infrastructure ready is one of the key aspects. In the reset phase, we talk about how the new policies are being built in. How do you develop the future plans and get the people? So all your trainings, your morale, all of it is something that most of the teams focus on. And in the reward is essentially where you're talking about clearer roles, understanding the new norm, which are unique from business to business, from sector to sector, understanding what is it that works best. And these three teams work. Although they are mutually exclusive to each other, the idea was they would have a governance where they get in touch and they interact with each other on a periodic basis, chaired by the CEO or the head of the organization, and therefore chop the way out. And I believe that although everybody talks about the murky side or the uncertainty of the COVID-19, I would like to leave all of you with just a thought saying that while this is obviously an impact that everybody, every one of us over here are feeling, and the organizations that we represent also are going through, what we should also look at is not miss the opportunity that this brings into to introspect across each aspect of our supply chain, each aspect of our value chain, the processes that we do, cut the fat, but still build on the key aspects, saying that not only are we looking at being a lean company, but we're also looking at being a resilient company, so that should there be any other issue that comes our way, we are able to sustain over that period of time. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all, and thank you Manohar and Sandeep for a wonderful platform, and it's been a pleasure presenting some of the thoughts and the slides from our side.
Thank you, Gautam. It's truly an enthralling presentation, I would say. Thank you very much, Gautam. So before we go for the third poll, I just have a gentle reminder to all of our audience to post your questions, as we'll be taking the question and answer session immediately after the third poll. So can I have the third poll, please, Manohar? Here. So the third question is that how do you evaluate your customers' current investment behavior, seeing the pandemic has a toll on the manufacturing industries? So these are the three questions: plans new investment, deferred or cancelled investment, or they want to continue with the original investment plan. So please share your thoughts on that. Wait for some time. So, can we have the poll results, please? Yeah, expected. This was mostly what is happening. 68% of the respondents says that customers are actually either deferred or cancelled the investment. Only 18% are going ahead with their planned investment, and only 14% will continue with the original investment plan. Thank you very much, audience. Now, friends, I would like to request my senior colleague, Mr. Manohar, kindly to take you forward the question and answer session and the latter part of the program. Over to you, Manohar.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sandeep. We had a very interesting presentation from Gautam as well as Kiran. Couple of questions coming in from the participants across on the screens. So the first question, Kiran, you're there across?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, Kiran, you're there. Okay, good. So the first question across to you. When you showed your slide on the contraction of the GDP of the economy of a country, you showed Eurozone showing a higher contraction than other regions. Any particular reason do you attribute this to?
Sorry, hello?
Yeah.
You're saying that? Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
The Eurozone, I originally mentioned that Eurozone is also expecting contraction. Anticipated drop in the second quarter was negative 14.4%. in Eurozone especially, the services dependent on mass configuration continue to be severely dented. And especially, what we notice is that in terms of rebound, Eastern European countries characterized by weaker spread of the disease are probably expected to recover faster than Western counterparts. However, export-dependent countries such as Germany and tourism-driven economies such as Spain, for instance, are the ones which are witnessing severe contraction, especially in the second quarter of this calendar year, 2020.
Okay, that's quite. The next one is a continuation to the same question, Kiran. These posted was the reasons for quick rebound in China. Since the global economy is in contraction and China being basically an export-oriented economy. So do you think these exports cannot possibly driving this rebound, or is there any other factor that's driving this rebound?
No, in fact, what we noticed was that if I recall correctly, China's GDP dropped in the first quarter by about 7%. As primarily because they were under stringent lockdown measures for about 70 days. But in Q2 itself, which is the second quarter of 2020 in itself, we already noted that China is probably fast returning to normalcy, with factories and businesses returning back and resuming their activities. Unless there is an instance of or concerns of coronavirus rebound in specific regions, we believe that the GDP growth of China will continue to be positive, significantly much lower numbers compared to the previous years. Maybe we should be looking at about 1 to 2% annual growth rate, and the growth rate should resume to normalcy and probably hit 5.5 to 6% in the next year, which is 2021. Both in terms of by virtue of low base effect and also pent-up demand in China.
Okay. Question to Gautam. We'll come back to Kiran. Let me also we'll balance between you and Gautam across. Gautam, you had mentioned in your slide resilience as one of the factors that we need to look at forward across. Now, is this resilience related to process or people or technology? Is there any case study you have very briefly across a typical use case you can share it with? That's what people are asking. I think you're muted across. If you can unmute.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good point, but if you look at it, I think there is no a blanket answer, because I think that this has to be customized to the kind of industry segment that you're operating in, and also the kind of services or products that you're offering. Why I say this is, if you look at one thing for sure, these three cannot operate without each other. They have to be in a team, and that's what, if you see in the last slide that I presented, I said you need to have these three with respect to the technology part of it, the growth part of it, other in terms of the strategic plan and the intent and the people and the processes coming on to support that growth plan. From the processes part, there are only few elements in the supply chain which have got actually disrupted, which needs to be rethought about. But I think the mindset and the people part of it is where I think a lot of investment, a lot of companies are actually investing into during this phase where there is a lot of transition or a lot of flux happening. The technology is, I think, the most important of the three, and the level of adoption of technology, I think in the last 4 months of these companies, the companies that I have felt that they have actually been able to mitigate these risks or been able to reduce the impact have been those that have already had a technology infrastructure and a base to probably mobilize much faster. And so I think in terms of priority, I would say technology number one, people would be the second part of it, and then the processes internally in manufacturing being the third part of it.
Very. That's well articulated. Thank you, Gautam. Another question related to the recruitment. Which sector is bound to be on a recruitment spree? I mean, that's interesting in these troubled times, especially in the manufacturing sector. So which sector do you feel is so some people asking which sector would be seeing uptick on the recruitment across. Yeah.
Let me put it this way: if you're looking at the potential or the need for people or skilled people, is obviously wherever the boom is happening or where there is a higher demand as compared to the kind of potential to supply. Your healthcare services, products related to that, and services related to that are obviously the prime focus areas. In the ICT sector, for sure, not the, well, it's not the entire spectrum, but all your service providers for the technology platforms, people who are able to handle this online. Design services has been something that has been actually seeing unexpectedly a lot of recruitment happening, cross recruitment happening as well in the recent months. Those sectors that I would say that are looking really promising in the near future would be still the core engineering sectors, because they're now trying. It's a good time to be in the organization because you're learning something that you'd never learn. Many people in their generation wouldn't have learned since they've not gone through a situation like this. So while there are lucrative sectors, but I think it's just a small phase which probably would die down and come back to normalcy by the first quarter, by the fourth quarter of this financial year. Maybe, and we should expect normalcy to start kicking in from Q1 of 2021-22 as such. So I hope that kind of answers.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's I think design would be one that's going to put, that's more of a, again on the knowledge process side. Kiran, coming back to you across, you spoke about 5D technology, and materials are in 3D printing is limited but expensive. What do you what will be the usage? You mentioned about medical industry, but what would be the other applications of 5D printer? How would it compare in terms of cost to 3D printing?
These are early days, obviously. Firstly, we're still kind of looking at applications of 3D printing. So 5D printing is potentially a futuristic innovation. Basically waiting in queue to happen. But having said that, I think I mentioned about healthcare, for surgical implants, or as well, in surgical teaching, using prototype parts of organs for improved learning. So healthcare is definitely one, application area that we believe would be where 5D printing would be applied, and also construction for building, complex architectural features, bridges, houses, primarily for artifacts. I think that's another potential area where 5D printing is likely to be used. And cost, any technology, cost will go down as it matures, right? So, I mean, the cost of drones 12 years back to what it is today is a fine example in itself. So, cost, obviously, the initial stages are going to be very high. But as the industry matures, as the product offerings mature, I'm sure the cost will definitely go down.
So I think since paucity of time, let's put it as a last question to either of you, both of you across. To you, Kiran, first, I'll continue with you. Which industry has moved the fastest with the adoption of technology and automation recently?
Okay. I believe, keeping aside ICT, e-commerce in itself, which potentially, is using a lot of interplay between various technologies, especially the digital technologies, being from cloud to natural language processing, to various automation in terms of customer experience, robotic process automation. E-commerce is an area, obviously, which potentially is, put into use a lot of technologies that we underlined already. Aside from that, I believe, manufacturing, since Gautam is here, probably, like Gautam mentioned, manufacturing is another area where primarily a use of drones and e-commerce, again, drones also go equally well with supply chain and e-commerce. So drones, robotics primarily, use of artificial intelligence, and I believe 3D printing, additive manufacturing. These are some of the technologies that are increasingly being used in the manufacturing sector. So these two sectors, I would say, as a factory of technologies as we speak.
Very good. Thank you very much. Gautam, the last question of the day to you across. people seems to have lost confidence in the government. Looks like that. What do you foresee are the lacking insights in the Atmanirbhar slogan, which has not taken off well from the government side? People seem that's what people perceptions are. What do you feel of it? What is your analysis and thought process on this?
It's a good question. I'm unfortunately apolitical, so I can't speak about the government slogans as such. I'm a manufacturing passionate professional, but on that side, what I would say is, I think it has always been the industry's endeavor to be self-reliant, and I think as a nation, one of the strengths of our economy has been manufacturing. It's been consistent. It's been a lot of industries in India, a lot of sectors in India have actually grown besides the government, not because of the government. So I think that is kudos to the industry in itself. And I think it's only this announcement or this vision or this slogan, whatever you want to call it, by the present leader of the country, is only hoping to get the other people who are relatively dormant to wake up to a call. And I think it's until unless you get that minimum mass moving in that direction. It's not like we never had this in the past. We've had it in the past. There are shining examples over the last 2-3 decades as such of companies, associations driving this, being self-reliant and things like that. But now that you've got the top man speaking that language, I think that kind of spurs some of these sleeping guys into action. And that's always good for the economy. It's good for the country. It's good for the skill sets. And I think it'll have what I am actually really excited about is this will actually have a spawning effect. It will have a cascading effect down even into making sure people are ready for taking up new technologies. Kiran spoke about a bunch of new technologies that are coming there. It's really exciting to see. And if you look at actually use cases of pilot, adoption of these kind of studies, a lot of Indian companies are willing to give it a shot. In fact, some of the latest technology adoptions, India is probably leading in terms of these use cases or pilots when compared to the European region. So they've been, they've gone there earlier, they've burnt their fingers, they've come back. It's our chance probably, but I think right now we're at a cusp where we've got exciting guys. We've got the top men speaking a language that is giving a direction. But I think it's always been the industry at the core of it. Who has always done whatever is required to bring themselves up. And I think that's one of our strengths. And I think that's what should keep it going, irrespective of what happens at the top. The direction is still pretty much clear.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that the industry has grown, not because of the government, but by itself across. That's a very good perspective. I think that should drive the people across and rather lose focus on, lose dependency on the government across. Yeah, I think we had, thank you, Kiran and Gautam. We had wonderful presentation from both of you all. Kiran spoke about the top 50 technologies that is already there today on the ground and also on the horizon across, and how quickly it could be adopted, and some salient features on few of them. And you spoke about the best practices in the management or in the manufacturing space on people, process, and various other activities across. So we thank you for it. I would also like to thank all our members and the industry fraternity who are present in large numbers today. And I sincerely hope you found the presentation useful and informative. To conclude, dear friends, it's very difficult to explain point about India is that the underlying need to grow is so strong that COVID or no COVID, government or no government. I'm just adding the last two sentences after listening to the last question. This energy cannot be bottled up forever. The average Indian need to earn and spend is partly the reason why COVID-19 infections are spreading in India. Both state and citizen have to learn to live with COVID, and until a cure is possible, we need to move on. Growth cannot be held back anymore. The only bright spot in this otherwise bleak scenario is an upbeat rural India, which have demonstrated that India can move forward. And now the urbanized Indians have to follow the rural Indians to take forward across. Hence, though we are all battling the stormy waters of COVID, but with resilience, foresight, and optimism, let us try to sail our boats to economic safety. Thank you all. Please stay safe, stay well, and stay connected. And let's meet you all in the future webinars. Dear friends, thank you all. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Sandeep, for organizing this. I think it was wonderful. You have driven it from the beginning and were responsible for getting the people frozen Sullivan on. Thank you very much, and thank you all once again.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Manohar.
Kiran.
Pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Take
All
care.
of you
Bye.
stay safe.
Stay safe.